a bit of a difficulty. We're going to change the schedule. We're going to start with the fireside chat with Nizar and Rabea. I'll let Nizar do the intros. Thanks for joining us on our first online event, and hope you guys enjoy it.
Hi guys. Well, you see, Rabea, nothing is smooth these days. But well, I guess we'll start with you then. So I'm Nizar, co-founder of Step, and I'm happy to have Rabea Ataya from Bait here.
Thank you, Nizar.
How's it going, Rabea? I mean, it's been tough times, different times, quite peculiar times. So how are you coping?
Yeah, alhamdulillah, I think I'm coping very well. I would say that for the first month or so, there was so much to do that it passed by almost too quickly. And I really didn't feel that the stress or strain of it. I think the first time I really felt that, oh my, I'm in lockdown, was this last Saturday when it felt like, this is a weekend, my kids want to get out, I want to get out, and none of us can get out, and there's not that much to do. But there's a lot that I can only help but be grateful for, obviously.
But can you say that you found some things that you actually enjoyed during this quarantine time?
Yeah, tons of things. And I think you hear a lot of people talk about it, but I think it's obvious that I enjoyed a lot of time with my family and real one-on-one time together. One of the pastimes we're doing at home is we bought a whole bunch of puzzles, and we're loving putting the puzzles together. The kids are baking something every day, and that's also wonderful.
Yeah, I got much better at cooking in the last month, so there's a new skill.
I'm a terrible cook, so good. It's good that you can cook. I'm well taken care of on the food.
If things go really bad, well, at least I got something.
There's a skill.
All right. So Rabea, you started Bait, back in 2000, 20 years ago, and it was right after the dot-com bubble had burst, right? So you're not new to these sort of difficult situations, crises, especially in the regions. You've lived them from the beginning. But even back then, you had the tenacity to start an internet business right in the midst of the dot-com bubble. So how do you look for opportunities in such situations?
Sure. So my experience, and particularly I think anyone's experience in the region, if you operate here long enough, you're going to see a lot of crises. So I had graduated from the US and worked in an investment bank and left to join my father's company. And as soon as I joined, even before I started Bait, we were hit with a massive slowdown in construction. And the business, it turned out there was a manager who had defrauded it. And my first experience as a 20-some-year-old was trying to scale down a business that was essentially bankrupt. And I had everything from laborers coming in who had not been paid their salary, wanting to beat me up, to basically banks trying to foreclose. And that was sort of my formative experience. And I think in every one of these difficult times, I found that it's a great time to look for investment opportunities. So just yesterday, I was hearing a speaker talk about, when there's strong winds out there, you can do one of two things. You can either go into your house and hide away, or you can build a windmill. And in every crisis, there's opportunities to build windmills. So when I went through that first experience with my dad, I decided I wanted to build a company that was the anti-construction company, and built a company called Infofort, which grew and prospered. And eventually, actually, Fadi, through Aramex, purchased that company. So this was an exit that I did when I was 25 years old. I started Bait while I was running Infofort. And again, I started it at what seemed like the craziest time. The dot-com bubble had burst, and less than 1% of the population of the Middle East was online. And everyone thought that was crazy. And yet we saw an opportunity when everyone was running to the door. And since then, we've done a lot of those. So we built GoNabit at the time when the global financial crisis hit, and we sold.
GoNabit was also right after the global financial crisis, right?
Yeah, Mom's World was also started. So Mom's World was started by a Bait founder, my sister, and I'm obviously a shareholder and investor. Also immediately, as a result of the global financial crisis, and now that's doing extremely well. And as recently as a few years ago in the region, in 2015, we started a virtual event platform called VFairs, which is basically an opportunity to do events like this.
Which we were talking about yesterday.
And in each of these cases, if I may just quickly conclude, upfront, we were insane. It sounded total contrarian. What are you doing at this time doing this? And at the outset, we thought we were perhaps insane too. But what happens is everything has its time. So in the beginning, it seems insane, but at some point the tide rises and it picks you up. And if you are there first, you fly. And so VFairs right now is going gangbusters for us. Mom's World.
I suppose the trend here, Rabea, sorry to interrupt you. The trend here is that, when you sometimes see things happening before they hit their peak, like if you look at Bait or if you look at, even your new digital event business that you launched, it's sort of this kind of predicting what's going to happen. And I think this is very relevant today because we see the world sort of changing really fast. I was reading this thing that says basically in crises such as these, history is not only shaped, but it's actually accelerated. And that's the kind of thing that we're seeing. Things that we expected to start happening maybe in a year or two are literally being crammed in a month or two. And that's something that people who entered early will actually reap the benefits of that, right?
And I would say that perhaps it's difficult to predict, but I think what we found is it's always good to have lots of bets out there. I've talked about some of the successful bets. We've obviously have some failed bets too. But I think at a time like this, it's important to look around and to say, okay, you know what? Everyone's running. I can't just sit and not do anything. I am, again, the son of Palestinian refugees. I always think of, refugees all around the world. You can't just give up. You have to wake up every day, no matter what the situation, and think, how do I build the best life for myself at this stage?
And you have to have plan A, plan B, plan C, right?
and some of them up front will seem crazy and people will mock you and they will laugh at you, but eventually their time will come. And I couldn't agree more with you. So, for example, our virtual event business, at some point, the only customers who were using it were very avant-garde because everyone preferred the physical fair concept. And we realized it was a much more efficient platform. And while our customers loved it, the acquisition was going very slowly. And then you get an event like this one, and suddenly you get huge adoption. And when people get used to it, they don't want to go back. The same with e-commerce. A lot of people would not order their groceries online previously. I think after we get out of this event, practically everyone will order their groceries online. Same with
online, exactly. Yeah, that's what I've been doing. Yeah. But I think this concept of having different bets in different places is especially relevant now because you realize how much resilience in a company is valuable, right? To have sort of the ability not to be pegged on only one revenue stream, to not completely go down when a certain part goes down, although a lot of sectors have been affected now. But you see that those few companies that had bets in different places that could actually survive this better than others.
Sure. Yeah, and I think part of that is because we were born out of crisis, we've always been very conservative in some ways. So one, we never were looking to play the valuation game. We were always looking to play the profitability, cash flow positive game. And that makes a big difference. We've been around longer than any other internet business in the region, 20 years now, and still operating because at year one, we said, we're going to raise one round of financing and we're going to get profitable after that. And if we don't, we'll close the shop down. And since then, for the last 20 years, that's been our focus, is to always be self-sustaining. So worry less about the valuations and worry a lot more about keeping a business that survives and that can continue to serve the community for the long run. So building resilience, a lot of it has to do with not being taken by the fashion of the moment, but always asking, is this good for the next decade?
And it's difficult when there's a lot of excitement and chaos and growth and investors asking you to grow and grow. And I think sometimes, and we've seen it as well in our startup, and I think many others, that when things are difficult, that ability to kind of preserve cash and be very frugal becomes extremely important. So now you've had time to kind of focus on Bait a lot more, right? So how are you guys doing during these times at Bait?
Yeah, so I think, again, the beauty about Bait is a lot of people who are familiar with Bait know Bait as a job site, which is an important part of our business. It was what we launched with 20 years ago. But over the 20 years, we've evolved a lot of products and services. So we own, for example, a business called Yalla Motor, which is an auto classified portal. We own another business called Talentera, which is an applicant tracking system, software as a service. We're actually the leading applicant tracking system solution in the region. We own a business called VFairs, which is a global provider of it's an event platform. And so what we've seen is the job business is actually challenged right now. And that's obvious. Most people are thinking about how they pay people. But the event business has seen a tremendous increase in demand.
The digital event business, yeah.
Right? The digital event.
The digital event, to specify, because we
and
not seen growth in the events.
Event business where we're catering primarily to the North American market. So we're a Middle Eastern company exporting to the US. Our customers are the leading universities. They're the Fortune 500. And so net, our business has done well. So March was a great month for us from a profitability and cash flow perspective. Actually, it was a highly profitable month. And in terms of business, while we didn't have a growth month last month, we also we had a single-digit decline in our top lines. And so, when
That's something to be proud of these days.
When you compare in the market, I know a lot of my friends and peers are talking about 90 to 95% declines in businesses. We haven't seen that.
We're talking about country GDPs that are talking about 30-40% cuts if the situation continues like that. So it's definitely remarkable to be in that position, which I suppose has paid off from this understanding of being smart and how you look at the things that are necessary. And I think we spoke about this, me and you, before, about the idea that when you are in the crisis, right, you realize what's essential and you realize what you've been spending on that's actually not necessary or doesn't necessarily serve your business. So how do you think entrepreneurs should be looking at this specific factor in these times?
Yeah, so I think, again, our experience has been that as human beings, we're terrible at multitasking. So what we did very early on in this crisis is we divided up our team into those who are focused onto the defense and those who are focused on the offense. And so the defense are people like the CFO, the head of HR, and myself are really looking about how do we preserve cash flow, how do we create efficiencies, how do we survive into the long run. And then our head of marketing, our chief commercial officer, our CTO are all thinking about investment opportunities. So they're out building new products, creating new relationships and driving the business forward. And I purposely exclude them from the conversations about how do we become more efficient, because if they start thinking about that too much, we go into a spiral. And similarly, I'm not spending too much time thinking about growth right now because I feel like I have to protect the organization and make sure that we're just not getting.
And so these two teams are sort of separate, like each one has a focus that is different, or an objective that is different.
We communicate massively, and particularly in this time, we communicate more than we've ever communicated. But if, for example, we're looking at a plan of how to increase resellers for VFairs, the head of HR, head of finance are not involved in that, nor am I. But if I'm looking at how do I save on office costs, I'm not speaking to them about that either. They're aware that it's happening, but they're not assigned any tasks. So
you're sort of keeping them away from the negativity of trying to firefight, and they can focus on.
That's brilliantly put. Their job every day is to come in and tell us great news, and our job is to come in every day and say some not so good news, and then on average, we end up doing well. And I guess, again, communication is just key so that we're aware, but we're not all doing each other's jobs.
So how's communication going with all these, Zoom and Skypes and Hangouts and whatever you guys, Microsoft Teams, I don't know what you guys use. How do you keep culture alive these days?
It's a great question. So we've done a few things. One, across the organization, everyone in the company has at least 2 huddles with their direct teams a day. These are 15-minute calls where they share good news, they share their main KPI and the main task for the day. And we do them twice a day, like clockwork, 15 minutes. We also have every single day a company-wide coffee coffee break, which is 30 minutes on Zoom, where everyone in the company can patch into the Zoom call. And we basically can chat about anything. People have talked about everything from...
Not about work.
It could be work, and sometimes we've talked about, what should we do with customers? Other times it's where do you shop for your food? Other times it's how do you keep your... fitness?
How many people join that?
So on average, we're a company of about 350, 360 people. I would say about 50% of the company are on most days. And so that's a pretty great turnout rate. And it's really optional, but it's also, we're a distributed organization. We're in 13 different cities. So this is a great way for people to get to know each other and to communicate and to share. In many cases, they share their concerns. So, for example, people from our office in Lebanon the other day were talking about how they're very worried about supply chain in Lebanon, how because of the currency crisis, because of the corona, and then other people started getting in and saying, asking questions, because there are obviously Lebanese who aren't in Lebanon right now who are concerned, and the people from India were comparing notes. So it's just wonderful to see the organization come together and have these sort of coffee break moments that aren't with an agenda, where people share ideas.
Yeah, I think that's great. A lot of people I've spoken to have told me that they've reconnected or even got to know their coworkers even more in these times that they're apart, which is quite ironic that people actually are finding more time to connect online. Probably because our lives were so fast and dynamic and busy that we didn't stop, and now you sort of have all the time. I've had calls with relatives that I hadn't done for years. I don't know why. Now it seems that everybody wants to have a call.
Even within the company, this really exposes who's a cultural fit and who adds the most value and who tries the most. It's in times of crisis that you really get to know who's really with you, heart, blood, and soul, and who isn't. And so they're important pauses. And like I said, I found that every one of these crises has made us better. So this too will pass, like everything else. And then the question is, what have you done at this time to really come out a lot stronger after this is done? And I think there's a lot of opportunities to come out better.
That's great. Okay. So I just want to go back to the point because I want to end with an idea to discuss with you, since you're sitting behind virtually the largest job site in the region, right? So we spoke about this idea how things have been accelerated, and that obviously has an impact on industry, an impact on jobs, and an impact especially on how jobs are actually done in different sectors and different industries. So, this idea we've always spoken about the future of work and how that's going to happen. So how do you think, do you think that this future of work will be actually, the present of work just in a few months? And how do you think that that's looking like?
Yeah, I think definitely we're accelerating the future of work. And to put it into context, how we're reacting to it. One is, for example, just on Bait right now, we're launching the sort of checkbox of remote work, where employers for the first time can say, we want people who want to work remotely, and also the job seekers can do the same. I mean, this was a concept that most people didn't even consider a few months ago, but has become just very important. We as an organization, we've realized the hard way. We're in 13 different jurisdictions. Everyone has different laws, and it's a painful process. We have auditors, lawyers. It's just managing that is so difficult. We're realizing we don't need all of these offices, nor do we need to keep all of the people that we have on this sort of full-time employment type of agreements. we can keep these people on consulting agreements, give them actually a better salary because it frees us up from a lot of the other overheads we have to pay to keep the office alive in the audit. So we're able to afford to pay them more. It gives them more flexibility, and we actually get more productivity out of them. So we're now very actively trying to migrate more of our contracts into consultant contracts as opposed to full-time employee contracts.
And I think that's going to be happening across the board.
Across the board. Everyone I speak to is talking about the same. You know, I just realized I don't really need these offices. They're a total waste of investment. I really don't need this amount of. That's not to say offices will disappear, but
no, absolutely. But things will change, into becoming more efficient. Okay, I think we're towards the end of our chat. It's been very interesting. Do you have any last words of advice for entrepreneurs that are listening and want to know from your experience, you know, the one thing to sort of think about in these times?
Yeah, I think for me, again, the takeaway always is never let a crisis go to waste. So I think this is, you know,
always find that opportunity.
Yeah, there's always a pot of gold somewhere out there, and it's waiting to be found. And again, some people will come out of this really so much better off than they were. And so while, you know, the worst thing to do is go purely defensive. It's important to be defensive.
That's great advice, I think.
Right.
I hope everybody will be looking for that pot of gold. Well, thanks a lot, Rabea.
Thank you.
I think we're going to see if we're going to have our next session with Fadi. We had some issues. I think Claudia.
Thanks, guys, for your time. Thanks, Nizar and Rabea. Everybody, thanks for joining this session. As we said, we have a bit of a change in schedule. We're going to have a 10-minute break now, and then you guys can report back to the stage. Make sure to try the networking room. It is like speed dating, so make sure that everybody is in there so that you can connect with different people. And see you in 10 minutes.
Thanks.